Oh, you can't hear me. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. You're good. And we are live. So hello and welcome to the Childcare Business Coach podcast. This is Evelyn Knight. And if you're watching on video, I am doing a dual purpose here again, where I'm recording for my podcast as we're going live. And again, let me introduce myself. My name is Evelyn Knight. I am the founder and CEO of Childcare Business Professionals, where we help childcare business owners learn how to run their business while turning a profit and increasing their quality by focusing on research-based quality standards. And I also am the host of the Childcare Business Podcast, which you are probably listening to this on right now. And I am a childcare center owner myself. So I do go into my center. I know what it's like to be there. I've been a director and done everything pretty much in between. So today we are joined by Future Cain. And before I let Future introduce herself, I want to talk to you guys a little bit about what we're talking about. So Future and I have been doing a series called What the Hell is SEL? And it's about social emotional literacy for early childhood leaders. And what we really wanted to focus on when we first started talking and getting together about this is, how does social emotional literacy pertain to equity and diversity within our centers? And one of the things we focus so much on in our industry is social emotional literacy for the children. But a lot of times we as adults are not well versed in social emotional literacy ourselves. And it just spills into so many aspects of our life. And I can tell you, when I first really started to think about this, it was really just for me an eye-opening moment where I realized I need to do this work. During the events that happened surrounding George Floyd, I really just saw some things happening around me, right? And I mean, we all did. The whole world hopefully did. But it really got me to start looking within myself and doing some soul searching. And I realized that I had really been lacking in my own practice of equity within my center, within my home, within my life. And so that is what really instigated my quest, basically, to just start learning, where am I lacking? So I reached out to Future, talked to her about it, was just honest and transparent with her, and told her my story and how I really needed to work on this within my own life, and asked her, to come in and help. And we've been chatting about my own personal struggles. And then I decided, this is something our community, our industry needs as a whole. And so we put this together and decided to come to you guys and bring it live. So I'm hoping you guys just really look within yourself to see, is this something that you too are lacking in? And I've told you guys, my mom immigrated here from Honduras. So I think I used that to hide behind. I just kind of thought to myself, well, I'm the daughter of an immigrant, so therefore I must be practicing true equity and diversity, right? But I think they use that to hide the fact that I really wasn't seeing it as a whole. Within my own culture, the Hispanic community, I saw it, but was I really practicing it for other cultures, right? Was I really including everybody? And so that was something I really had to just dive deep into myself and admit to myself, no, you're not truly practicing this the way it should be. So I really challenge you guys out there to ask yourself the same thing. Are you hiding behind something also, like I was? Are you justifying your actions when it really isn't true equity? So if you've missed the rest of the series, make sure you're on the Facebook group, catch up on the series, and just really focus on, how can we make sure the children in our care are really getting that equity that they deserve, and our staff as well. It is twofold, right? It's our staff, everything, the messages we put out there. It's the whole, even in our personal life, right? We need to really focus on all of this. So
here you go. I'm on. You got to bring it downstairs.
Please don't be afraid to ask us questions. If I know
you can't play
this
up here.
can be a touchy subject. So this is something that you can actually email Future on, and I'll have Future give you her contact information. If you don't want to put it in the comments, feel free to email us. Future is definitely not judgmental at all. She just wants to help bring awareness, help us to see and to become the better versions of ourselves, right? So make sure to contact her. If you do feel comfortable, we would really appreciate conversations in the comments just to get the conversation started, struggles you've had, or just how do we all need to grow. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Future and let Future introduce herself and give you her contact info.
Can everybody hear me? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. So I guess everybody always says, well, what's your story? And I try not to define myself as my titles, because at the end of the day, when I am off this earth, this planet, when people speak of me, they're never going to say, oh, she was the director of social emotional learning, or she was the assistant principal, or she was a special education teacher. So when I talk about myself to each of you, I think what's important for you to know is, one, I'm a mom. And I am a mom who has 2 elementary school children, one who literally just came out of the early education centers. So that's important. And both of my kids have gone through early education centers because I did not want to stay home, right? I was working, so you all took care of my children. The other thing that I would say sets me apart from people is my yoga practice. And there's pillars of yoga, and one happens to be the asana, which a lot of people here know what it is. It's the physical practice of yoga. But yoga has many different pillars, and asana is just one of those. So you take in the meditation, you take in the breathing, there's a variety of other pillars. And I pride myself on that, and I've been practicing yoga for many different years. So I think that explains who I am. I'm also on a mission just to help educate people, whether that's educating myself from my children educating me, or the children that I've served over the last 20 years, the adults that I've come into, or whether that's just educating everybody else, because the beautiful gifts I've been given through my work of yoga and through social emotional learning, I know are very important for everybody else to understand and to implement as their daily practice, and then a practice that they can embed in the children that they too serve. So I guess what I would ask everybody to think of is, we're in a society right now, and when COVID hit, I told the group that I worked with, right, the leadership team, I said, we are going to see a spike in anxiety, depression, physical violence, and just mental health in general once COVID hits. And then that was even before, obviously, the civil unrest went in. So what I would tell you is, you have all these increases in those different areas. I'm sure some people, I guess I would ask, right? And Evelyn, if you could tell me, how many people have seen an increase in meltdowns in the students? One, you either serve if you're back in your early childhood centers, or your children at home. And I sit here to tell you, I'm going to raise my hand, me, right?
Yes, absolutely.
I wrote an article that was published because I saw the effects of social emotional learning. Now, here's the thing. I've practiced this with my kids for years, right? We do meditations, we practice yoga, we practice breathing. So all the skills that I want to teach everybody, I've practiced with my kids. And they had skills that other kids didn't have. But even in the wake of all of that, this time was a time of struggle for them. So I guess I would just call on people to sit and think, hey, how many of you, yep, can I see it? I could totally see it. Or even as you as an adult, right? I've talked to so many adults, whether it was staff members, whether it was leaders, whether it was people I'm linked into on LinkedIn, that have said, I have all these different emotions that are coming up within me. And most of them has center around fear and anxiety, right? So then how are you managing through that? And that's what this whole series is about. And today's is about self-management of exactly that, your own emotions.
Right. And Corey's actually commenting that she's seen meltdowns with adults during this pandemic more than ever. And that does spill over to the children because
Yes.
they feel and they sense that. And a lot of times people aren't communicating with them. So
Yes.
they don't understand why all the adults around them are suddenly stressed out and they're feeling it. So absolutely, it is really affecting the children because of how we are reacting as adults.
So here's what I would tell you, Corey, then. My goal, obviously, with implementing for me, one, as a parent, but then for two, the kids that I service, and then three, hopefully the kids that I can help you with, service and the adults. The goal is basically to have people be more present, right? And if we're more present and in the moment, we're present. We're not focusing on the past because that's what so many people are, oh my gosh, like think of what happened in the past, or this kid displayed all these different things. And we're not focused on the future, right? The fears of when is my center going to open? When am I going to be able to make payroll possibly? Is there going to be another meltdown? When are the kids going back? Are we going to have enough slots, right? There's so many things that you think about in the present. And I'm not sitting here saying don't plan for the future because I think that's important. But I think when you focus so much on the future or on the past, you're missing the present moment. And then when you do that, you're not focusing on the present. But if you focus on the present, it will bring you better communication skills. It will improve your academic performance of the kids. The demonstration of the behaviors that you're seeing, the meltdowns of the kids will decrease. So it basically impacts your climate and culture, not only for your children that you service, but also for the adults. So the order for today is, in case you have to come in or out, is the definition of SEL, and we've centered on that, and then equity. Questions from the first episode, if anybody on the call has any, we will give you the chance to ask those so that we can answer. And then going through why even spend time on social emotional literacy learning. Then a deep dive into what this series topic today is self-management. How is that important to our current times of civil racial unrest and in a time of pandemic? How this is important and who it's important for. And then I go over a couple of resources. So social emotional learning is the way that both adults and children practice the knowledge and attitudes and skills that are necessary to understand and manage your emotions. Corey just spoke about that, right? There's kids and adults having literal meltdowns right now. The next is set and achieve positive goals, because obviously if you're seeing those meltdowns with whether it's an adult, yourself, or children that you service or that you have at your house, we have to still maintain positive goals that our children or we will achieve. Feel and show empathy for others. I think now is the time where, now more than ever, I would call people to be as non-judgmental and as compassionate, and you have to step into the shoes of empathy to truly understand others, because a lot of the conversations that you may be forced to or choose to have are very difficult conversations. And I keep telling people that if you don't sit with yourself and know who you are first, it's really hard then for you to have empathy or hear other people and truly understand where they're coming from. The other piece of the social emotional is that to establish and maintain positive relationships, because if you can do all this, right, without judging people and be empathetic to them, you are essentially going to build those positive relationships to be even stronger than you have now. I will say, and I don't know how many people agree with me, but in a time right now where we were forced essentially to be in a house with our partner or children, whoever's there with you, you tested your relationship, and the divorce rates in some areas has spiked, right? Because people haven't had to sit with each other for that long in those close quarters. But the other relationships, I could say for me personally, the relationships with my children and with my husband have strengthened because we really had to support, understand, provide empathy, set goals, and sit through each other's emotions. So I am blessed to be put in this situation, as many awful outcomes that there have been. And then the last piece of the social emotional learning are making responsible decisions. We've seen, unfortunately, I'll show you a clip today. There's lots of people who I would say aren't probably making the most responsible decisions right now. And I don't want, because your emotions have the best of you, any of you thinking and then acting on those emotions and then not making the best possible choice, not only for yourself, but for the family that you have, the families that you serve, and the staff that you serve too. So I put this transformational SEL slide up, and we've been talking about it every single time, but I think it's important for people to know the framework that I choose to follow is the CASTLE framework. And CASTLE, in the wake of George Floyd, basically has said, and they didn't say it in these exact words, but that the SEL competencies and all the best practice work that we've put out didn't have enough equity in there either. So they're even transforming who and what they are right now in the wake of everything that has happened, which I applaud and I appreciate. So the transformational SEL definition is it's the process by which young people and adults build strong and respectful and lasting relationships that facilitate co-learning. And I italicize and bolded co-learning because it is co-learning. You learn from the kids just as much as the kids learn from you. The critical examination of root causes of inequities, as we've seen in the wake of George Floyd and civil unrest that's going on right now, the inequities in the United States and across the world have a big light shown on them, which I think is good because we could dismantle and we could rebuild. And the development of collaborative solutions to personal, community, and societal problems. Because if people want to sit there and say, well, it's not my problem. No, actually it is. And Evelyn and I have lots of discussions of, we're essentially all in this together. And the sooner people can open their eyes to see, I am because of you, then we will be able to move this work of dismantling inequities a lot faster. So I will pause to see if there's any current questions or previous questions from the second series that we did with self-awareness.
I'm not seeing any questions. We do have a comment. Yes, I realize realizing the abnormal circumstances, we shouldn't expect normal responses. I think that's a great point in that giving people grace right now.
Yes. So this next slide that I have up is who are you really and how are you managing, right? Now, Corey said before, and I'm going to ask for comments, right? I like interaction. So I'm hoping everybody could just put something in there so we could read them, because I think there's going to be a trend, to be quite honest, because when I'm asking people, I'm seeing trends throughout these months since March. So the question again is, who are you really and how are you managing? The things that I've seen people say and how they're managing during COVID-19 and racial unrest are similar emotions, but most of the emotions that come up for people are stress, anxiety, fear, shame, judgment, tiredness, guilt, and grappling with all that's going on. So I would ask you, do you agree you are either feeling those emotions, or you've seen people feeling those emotions, or you've seen children feel those emotions? Do you agree? And if you don't 100% agree, what other emotions have come up for you or have you seen in children or adults that you work with currently?
Sorry, I have to unmute myself there. We do have a okay, I'm sorry. For those of you guys watching too, my Facebook is on a little bit of a delay. So future, just so you know, it looks like we are on about a 1 minute delay. So it might take the comments, but if you want to keep going, and then I'll jump in and let you know if the comments do come, like when they start coming in.
That's absolutely fine. So I think here's the thing. I say to people, it's been a roller coaster of emotions, one, and two, we are in a mental marathon. And at the end of the day, if you don't have your own self-awareness, and if you don't have ways to manage through those emotions that you're experiencing, and having resources and skills and best practices to help the children that you're serving manage through this, the time in which they come back, if they haven't already come back to your centers, because I heard some centers are open, some centers aren't. So I caution you to say, what is your plan? You see this in adults. So if you think that the adults aren't transferring it to the kids, or the kids aren't at least examining what they're seeing their family members do, that maybe they've been forced to stay at home with now for an extended period of time and aren't going to come to your early childhood centers with those same emotions and those lack of skills managing through those, I'm going to caution you to say, what plan do you have? And did you even say, hey, I need to have resources to talk about and to teach those kids this, because we're reteaching essentially, right? We don't know what has happened in the month, 2 months, 3 months that they weren't with us. So therefore we might have to start from ground zero again, because you have to, I pride myself on meeting people where they're at, right? Even if it's when I'm doing professional development, everybody's not going to be at the same place in this game. So educating from a point of, okay, I'm going to start from step one. And if I could go faster with a group of people, I will do that, but I can't leave anybody behind either, because this work is important. You also have to remember that kids are going to act differently. And what that looks like for every kid, you and I both know is going to be very different, but we can't ignore the fact that they could most likely, some of them, be coming back with some sort of trauma. They could be coming back with post-traumatic stress disorder. They could be coming back with shame or guilt or fears or anxiety or depression. And then what plan do you have in place to move forward to help them with that? So I would ask you questions of, what are your new goals for your centers? Did you even think about that? Are those new goals aligned to social and emotional literacy and learning? What are the major problems that you're seeing right now? And are you sitting, looking at your budget and training and giving professional learning to the staff on all these components that are greatly going to affect the climate and culture of your center when people get back in full? So I think people often ask the question of, well, why am I going to spend time on social and emotional learning? And I think Evelyn would put more information in, but I'm going to cover what I believe is the why behind why spend time on social emotional learning. The reason is there's been studies, right? There's research. And obviously, if you'd like to talk to me and reach out to me, I could point you into the direction of the research and the studies. It's directly correlated to success and happiness as an adult. And you know as well as I know, the 0 to 7 time frame of a person or child is key foundational periods of building. And you, as the directors and of the managers of those centers, have them during that essential time frame. So we are building the foundations for people, and the brain waves essentially are being built now that are directly going to correlate to the success of them and their happiness when they become older. The other thing that's important is the lack of these skills, unfortunately, is correlated with the increase in chance of unemployment, divorce, poor health, criminal behavior, and imprisonment. And I don't know if you look at the whole child. I don't know if you say, you know what, I have this child right now, and what will they become later on in life? And I don't know how many kids you've seen in the streets or have come back and thank you, right? Family member wise. But I do know that you and what you're doing at each of your centers has a major impact on that kid's life, and so many different factors. Like I stated before, the unemployment, their health, whether they get into the prison system or not, happy marriages. So I want you just to think on that, because it has, what the service that we're providing to these children has a major impact on their life forever. The other thing that's important to note is the SEL instruction, in which I'm saying should be implemented at the centers, and best practice wise, not checklist wise, is it's proven to have better academic performance for the children. And the achievement scores on average of 11 percentile points. Now, I know the daycares and early childhood centers work very differently than school systems, because obviously the kids take a lot of testing once they get to that level, the K through 12, and it's proven to have an impact. And there's also a stronger correlation of school readiness if they have implemented SEL, as opposed to a child's IQ and math or reading skills. So I'd say that's pretty huge. On top of that, they have improved attitudes and behaviors. You said it, right? People are melting down right now, unfortunately. So if they have the skills and the resources to manage through all this and build the positive relationships and make good decisions, there's a greater motivation for them to learn, to have a deeper commitment to school, which obviously all of you would want here, increased time devoted to their own schoolwork, and better classroom behavior, which then you would see less behaviors that need to be recorrected and taught and modeled to the kids. There's fewer negative behaviors, so a decreased disruptive class behavior, noncompliance, or aggression, which you might see heightened right now. Delinquent acts or disciplinary referrals, especially when they're in the K-12 area. And then reduce emotional distress. Lots of people, adults and children likewise, are going through what's caused emotional distress right now. So when people have the SEL embedded into all that they do, there's fewer reports of student depression, anxiety, stress, and social withdrawal. And I just said previous that the depression rates, the anxiety rates, mental health in general, and violence has gone up during this time. And I believe it's because people they don't have the skills and they don't know how to manage through the emotional distress that they're experiencing right now. Evelyn, it seemed as if you wanted to add something, so I apologize.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, I was waiting for you to get done with that part. So one of the things I want to add too on the importance there is for what I do here as a business coach when it comes to early childhood care and childcare centers. One of the biggest struggles that I hear from owners and directors is employee retention. And I was telling you last night that the average employee retention rate in this industry is only 6 months. And this piece is huge when it comes to employee retention. So becoming literate yourself in social emotional and knowing yourself and your staff and having that empathy is one of the key essential pieces in order to be a great leader who can retain their employees.
Mm-hmm. I couldn't agree with you more, right? Because at the end of the day, and I said this last week, people remember how you make them feel. They do. And you could use examples. You could use examples. I still remember how some of my elementary school teachers treated me. And I don't have positive memories of how I was treated. So if I still remember sitting in my 40s, how I was treated when I was 6, 7, 8, 9, I know each of you have more recent memories of how you were made to feel when you went into a store, or when you were at a restaurant, or when your spouse talked to you a certain way, or a family member talked to you a certain way, or you saw an interaction between 2 of your staff or 2 of your children, how all that made you feel. And that's why I said this is essential for anybody that has a early childhood center to embed this, because we're seeing kids that they don't know how to manage everything that's been thrown at them during this time. We're seeing adults that don't know how to manage everything that's thrown at them at this time. And then we have to remember that there's different people and different identities that they bring to the centers on any given day. I put this pyramid up last time of Maslow's hierarchy because we have to not forget, and I'm going to keep stressing it, if the psychological needs of a person, which is food, water, warmth, and rest, are not met, it will be close to impossible for them to feel safe, feel loved, feel belonged, to gain the knowledge that you're trying to provide them, and to have a self-confidence and a love within themselves, because their basic needs aren't being met. So if your center has closed down, and I'm not faulting you for closing down, right? Everybody had to make the best decision that they felt was the best for them and their staff and their families. But at the end of the day, you can't then not put into a lens of, I have kids at home that maybe were dealing with not having food provided to them for 3 meals a day. I have kids at home now that maybe didn't have water to take a shower because their parents lost their job and couldn't afford. I have kids at home who, thankfully, it's pretty warm outside, but maybe they don't have money to turn on air conditioners and they couldn't get a good night's sleep because they're hot. I also know I have kids at home. I know I could speak for the school district, any school district at this point, right? I could even speak for probably some families out there that were experiencing violence. I don't know whether it was sexual, whether it was physical, whether it was emotional, but there's some people that unfortunately were stuck in a situation that they're stuck with their abuser and couldn't get out, whether it's for 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months, but that's the situation that some people unfortunately have been put into. So then if you don't have all those needs met, it's really hard then to feel loved and want or even know how to form positive relationships and make good decisions. And that's why Evelyn said all of this ties in to the climate and culture of your staff. Because if your staff, right, do you know what's going on with your staff members? I don't know. You may not, but are they completely safe at their houses, right? Those are all factors to consider. Same with the family members. Do you know what's going on in every single family's house? Because oftentimes people don't want to tell you either. But then the consistency that each child has is you and I, right? They're with us probably 8 hours a day. And I know when my kids were still at the preschool and early childhood center, they were probably staying there 9, 10 hours a day. So we have kids that are with you that many hours a day, and it's more than what they would be with us at a K-12 system. Well, depending on if you have an after-school program for them. But I think you need to consider that. So the first focus we should have is on their well-being, which then is exactly social emotional learning. And I'm not just talking about the students, I'm talking about the adults too. The other point that I wanted to make are the factors that affect self-management, and there's numerous, and I covered some of them. The poverty is one. And I don't know if you even know the data for your area. It's easy to look up, and if you need instructions, I'm sure I could find that data for you. But what is the poverty rate for the community that you service? And then I'll go even one deeper because data is important. What's the poverty rate for the kids that attend your center? I think that's important for you to know, especially in the wake of going back, because there's extra added related stressors that are impacting them, one, and their family, and then two, the neural networks associated with self-regulation, right? It's all brain chemistry is what it comes down to. And to have those, any stressor will add, slow down your brain essentially, and it'll slow down your ability to make good judgments, and it will slow down your ability to function in a high stress time. So all those do impact. The other thing is parenting, right? You have them for 10 hours a day and you're consistent is what I would assume. And if not, I would hope and caution you to consider how consistent can we be in each classroom, right? And when the kids leave you, they go home to their parents and their guardians. So I don't know what the parents and guardians look like because no two parents are the same. But for parents, they need to be positive role models. And with everything that the adults are facing right now, there's lots of adults who unfortunately have lost their jobs. I don't know how positive of a role model you're going to be if you, I don't know how positive of a role model you're going to be if you're worried about, oh my gosh, I just lost my job and now I can't afford to feed my kids. The next thing is encourage autonomy by allowing children to take the lead in certain decision making. We oftentimes want to constantly tell the kids what to do, but at the same time, we have to allow them to get some of their voice heard too. They want to say, well, I'd like to choose my station, or I would like to play with this friend. At this given time, they may not have even one choice, and that one choice could be of how they want their hair done, or what clothes they want to wear, or what snack they want. So don't forget to remember all those key components. The other thing is high assertions of power and extreme harshness. So at home, right? I don't know what the parenting style is, but are they receiving physical punishment when they aren't listening to the so-called rules or norms of the house? That then it's been proven if kids are physically punished, it leads to poor self-regulation. So if you're trying to teach them 5 times something, and if they still can't regulate their emotions, then it's because something could possibly be going on. The other thing is ethnic background. And that's why we talk about equity, right? And cultural responsiveness is super important, because a person's ethnic background will then come with different, thank you, will come with different norms. But do you even know all the different norms that the different cultures that your center has, and do you embrace those? Because a kid may be confused if, hey, I was at home for 2 weeks, 2 months, these were the norms in which I had to follow by, but now you want me to automatically assimilate and just switch into your centers, but then nobody's reteaching me what I need to do. School-based interventions. So what I say everyone should be practicing, or I suggest, is explicit teaching of self-regulatory strategies. So how are you teaching each one of your students to manage through their own emotions, and how are you teaching the staff to manage through their emotions that they're currently facing in a wake of a heightened time, right? In the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of civil unrest. And I say some of those interventions that you can apply is yoga would be one, and the pillars of yoga. I'm not just talking about, yes, yoga to teach the asana practice to children is super beneficial, but I'm also talking about the breathing techniques and the being mindful and being present and being still. And then restorative practices is also something else that I would implement or suggest to implement. The next is, I guess, Evelyn, I would question, and I don't know if they could answer, how many of the centers actually have students with special needs? And I say that because I don't think I said this before, but my master's is in special education. So majority of the time that I have been in education, I've serviced not only obviously students with a disability, a variety, right? Ranging from autism and Asperger's all the way to obsessive compulsive disorder or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So how many of you actually have a student with special needs in your centers?
I know I do. We have quite a few, actually.
Okay.
So since that is something that we do there, and since I'm in a more rural area, there really isn't anywhere for them to go. So we try to accommodate as much as we possibly can.
Okay, which is nice, right? But then here's the thing. Everybody doesn't need the same thing, right? And people need to realize that. I know we always tell our staff members that a child is regular education first, right? And then because they need extra, then they also get special education services. But you have to remember they're regular ed first. So then I put this slide up because people need to then know if you have a special needs child or children at your center, they are often going to require direct, explicit instruction. And are you doing that? How much time is being allotted to that? They are also going to need to set manageable goals by chunking. So the way in which a teacher is teaching that, maybe hypothetically speaking, the students to self-regulate, are they chunking and breaking the process down into smaller pieces to help that student understand? Third is they need modeling and opportunities for them to actually practice what you're trying to teach them. How many opportunities are you affording them? And then the last I added is additional visual support, right? Why can't you create a sheet that's laminated if they have maybe more aggressive tendencies, right? Then give them a reminder. Where's their reminder? What's the visual that it looks like? And then you could keep modeling and pointing. Here's your reminder. What are you trying to say? What do you need to calm your mind down and center yourself? Those are all things that I would say people need to implement, but then are you thinking to do that? All right.
And
So,
Corey has a really good comment. I'll interrupt just because it
oh,
is actually
okay.
a pretty good comment. She says, isn't it amazing to think about the kids that are what they're learning, things we were never taught as children about managing their emotions, breathing, and mindfulness. As an employer, I am excited to see how this will change the workforce in the future. It's great. And she has a great point. We are doing better. So, and I think that'll be an awesome change also as an employer myself. It'll be great to see.
Okay, so here's what I'm going to say about to Corey. What's funny, it's not funny, right? But Corey, that's why I'm super passionate. And on a mission because I didn't realize until my 30s, essentially, oh my gosh, if I had all the things that I'm offering now to myself or to my children, my world, literally, my world and the world we live in, I think would look very, very differently. And I truly believe whatever centers, well, I'm not even going to say believe, I know, because I will then probably talk to those centers in 5 years. I know the centers that say future here, let's work together to do this, that implement this, the kids and the families and the center in which they have will literally be transformed. I bet you in 2, 3, 4, 5 years, the center in which they had and the center in which it will be will not look the same because of all these things. Okay, sorry. So I put this beautiful flower up again. And last week we talked about this when we were on the self-awareness piece of the SEL wheel. And what I say is diversity is defined as the cognitive growth and citizenship. And what people have to remember is there's so many different identities a person comes with. Your adults, your spouse, your own children, and the children in your service on any given day. And we can't forget about those. But I also said race often is the one at the middle, right? And I talked about the example of if you're walking down the road, you are most often never going to say, oh, that person over there has attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Oh, that person is lower socioeconomic status. That person is 55. That person speaks 5 different languages. That person associates with being straight. That person is definitely a Christian. Most people are never going to say that, but I hear countless people saying to me, and I'm sure some people said it today, hey, Evelyn's hosting socially emotional literacy learning series for early childhood centers. Did you see it? Uh-huh. And people say yes. And I'm sure there's some people possibly even now sitting on the call that then go to, and the person she's hosting it with is a Black female. Now, I said last week too, why the need to then insert Black, biracial, whatever you want to label it, female, right? It could be, hey, there's 2 female hosts, because nobody would ever say, Evelyn, the white childhood center owner consultant, is hosting SEL. People wouldn't say that. So that's why in this graphic, race is at the middle, because our United States and the world has shown race is super important. We've demonstrated that with all we do, and we've demonstrated race matters. We've demonstrated the inequities in which those who look a certain way and those who don't are treated. So that's why I will keep putting this up, because it's a huge part of equity. It's a huge part of dismantling our systems. It's a huge part of your own self-awareness too. Okay, do you have anything to add, Evelyn?
Not at this time. Let me just check. And yes, and we don't have any new comments at this time.
Okay, perfect. So self-management. Okay, what is it? So basically what self-management is, it's the ability to regulate one's emotions, your thoughts, your behaviors effectively in different situations. Because you're going to have situations that you're going to come to that you're going to have to handle as the daycare owner. You're going to have situations where you're going to have to handle the situation as a daycare owner to daycare owners, as a daycare owner to your daycare staff, as a daycare owner to your daycare children, or to the families that you service. In addition, that's one role you play as a person. You also have the situation of, maybe I'm a mom, I'm also a spouse, I'm a sister, I'm a brother. right? You have many different roles that you wear on any given day. So what emotions, thoughts, and behaviors, they all transcend and, are with each other, because you can't say, if your morning starts out crappy at your house, that most of us don't have the self-management to completely say, I'm leaving that at home and it's not going with me to my job. And that's why I'm saying the social emotional learning piece and your awareness and your management skills will bring you to a point where you could say, I have to leave that at my house and I have to be present in this moment to this new situation that I'm going to. The other piece of the definition for self-management is it includes managing your own stress, which a lot of people are experiencing right now, controlling your impulses. We've seen lots of people having different impulses and doing different things that unfortunately are then causing many people to lose their jobs right now because they can't manage their own self. It's causing them to have a financial impact on who they are, how people view them. Motivating oneself, right? One of the characteristics I put down before is people are tired. Even though I'm tired, I still have to go. I still have a job. I still have a husband. I still have 2 kids that I have to service and all the kids at the district. So there isn't really a time for me not to be motivated to keep going. And then it also includes setting and working toward achieving personal and academic goals. We all have goals, right? I'm sure you have a financial goal tied to your centers. I'm sure you have a personal goal tied to your centers. I'm sure there's things that you wanted to accomplish this year for yourself, your staff, your children, of goals that you have, in addition to all the personal goals that you had. So that is what the definition of overall self-management is. So if you look at skills that are associated with self-management, if you break it down, it's basically your impulse control, your stress management, your self-discipline, your self-motivation, goal setting, and organization skills. So the question that I would ask is, how many people for impulse control can have delayed gratification and focus on another pleasure? There's been studies on kids who did this. The marshmallow study, I don't know if anybody's ever heard of it. And basically they had kids in room and they said, okay, if you choose to not eat the marshmallow for an amount of time, we will give you 2 marshmallows. If you choose to eat the marshmallow right now, then you only get 1. Well, obviously for any kid, 2 marshmallows is better than 1, but there was a lot of kids who they couldn't delay the gratification and the impulse and control their impulses to wait to get the 2. They just had to do it right then. And we've seen time and time again in the news, there's just people, whether it's adults or children, who can't control their impulses. Next one is stress management. You have to remember, a lot of people are under an uber amount of stress. And everybody has different amounts of stress, because if you're a person who is financially struggling right now, if you're a person who has a spouse who lost their job, or maybe you've lost your job, if you're a person who has now have to educate their own kids on top of serving all the others, there's been a lot of extra added stress, right? Maybe you're a person who has medical concerns that now COVID has put you in a different bracket and you have to be super sensitive to what's going on. So I think all those things need to be realized. The self-discipline part is, we have to remember that we are in control of our own feelings and our own impulses. And what that is it's called willpower. But under these certain events, your willpower may be decreased, but what are you doing to get it back to the normal setting in which it would be at, I'll say. Self-motivation, you need to be smart. And when I say smart in regards to self-motivation, is it's specific, it's measurable, it's attainable and realistic and timely. So you can better prepare the students to successfully meet their goals and your goals for them. So we have to set goals to motivate them too. Next, goal setting. Students have their own goals too, but are you listening to what their goals are? And then how are you willing to support them? And then organizational skills. I know a lot of people are on hey, I could get all this stuff done because we're closed. And how organized and how much were you able to complete is what I'll say. The next thing we're going to be talking about is being a social thinker. And at the end of the day, we are here as educators and parents, right? Because we're educators and parents, a lot of us, and we need to teach. That's what we've been called to do. And whether it's teach the adults that we serve, teach the parents that we serve, teach the children that we serve. So how are you teaching? And what are you teaching would be my two questions. You have to also remember that we're teaching kids by what we're modeling, what we're not modeling, what we're saying, what we're not saying. So how they know to observe themselves is because of you. So whatever you do, oftentimes they're going to mimic, and they're going to mimic how you act in certain situation, and they're going to mimic those around them, whether it's their parents, whether it's the other kids, or whether it's the teachers. So has everybody been in an alignment of what the expectation is and with how many times or what you are going to teach them so that they can manage through their emotions and they're not showing up how you don't want them to show up, but yet they were never taught not to how to show up. To figure out the hidden social rules. Society, and one, I think we talked about this the last time, and I'm laughing because one of our hidden social rules, well, two, I'll talk about two, and maybe Evelyn, you could say one. One of the social rules that we had here in the United States, especially when we were doing business, is to do what? Shake a person's hand, right? And I'm sorry, but that might be a social rule that nobody has ever said, right? Nobody ever, I mean, maybe we did get taught it, but you just knew that's what we do when we're in business. We shake each other's hand when we first meet them, or after we've closed the deal, or when greeting somebody. That's what we do. But now with COVID, you're not going to shake. I've come to many people that I've met recently, and I look at them and I think we feel awkward because we're so trained to do it. And it's so ingrained in us as our social rules and the norms. I'm not shaking your hand anymore because who has COVID, right? There's lots of people who are asymptomatic. I have no idea. I have no idea who you've been exposed to. So I probably won't ever shake anybody's hand ever again. I don't care if it's 5 years from now or 50 years from now. Evelyn, how do you feel?
Oh, absolutely. And by nature, I am a major introvert, which I know a lot of people would be surprised at that, but I am very introverted. So a lot of the social norms that COVID has kind of done away with, for me, are a huge relief, because a lot of people don't understand when you're introverted, and things like shaking hands, even we condition ourselves to be okay with it, but it is awkward that, and so I'm thrilled at not having to shake hands anymore and having a little bit more personal space. I love Zoom meetings, I don't know. I kind of joke that this COVID world is like a dream come true for introverts.
Okay. I hear it. Maybe even the social rule, right? The social rule before we went into COVID was everybody has to be at work to work, right? Remote learning, remote jobs were, I don't want to say unheard of because we did have them, but it wasn't the norm by any standard in the United States, right? And I think people showcase that, not everybody, right? Because at the daycare centers and at the early childhood centers, you can't do that.
Right.
But there's lots of professions in which you could do just as good a job staying at home than going into the office and suscepting yourself to possibly all these other health concerns. So there's lots of other hidden social rules that you're teaching kids on a daily basis. Here, and some teachers say it, some teachers don't. One of the rules, raise your hand.
Right.
No talking what anybody else is talking. And what you have to remember is that's a culture thing, right? And I'll even go to churches. If you go to certain churches, right? A Baptist church compared to a Catholic or Christian church, Catholic and Christian, and I will say this as a former Catholic, right? I was born and raised, I went to Catholic school, kindergarten through 8th grade. So talk about, I went to church weekly. Okay.
Me too. Yeah.
Okay. So here we go. There's so many social rules in the Catholic Church, right? No talking, kneel during this time, stand up during that time, do this, do that. We're programmed to be quiet, right? And if you talk, I've had it happen to me countless times, shh, right? Or people are looking at you as if, how dare you are talking, whether it's I'm talking to my kid because they said, mommy, can I have a snack? Or mom, whatever they're saying. Well, I need to communicate with my kid too. But then if you go to some other churches, and one is a Baptist church, which my father's side of the family was, there's always talking. It's an interruption of amen, praise the Lord, hallelujah, right? If they believe in what you're saying, they want you to hear them and hear
Right.
the conviction in which, yes, I totally get that. So now if you have certain kids that are coming to your classroom and they're blurting out, right, I totally get it, or red, okay, my dog has a red bow on today, that kid's going to be looked at as you're not meeting the social norm or the rules, even though we didn't tell you, of the classroom, and they're going to be looked at as bad. But yet they've been programmed that that's a good thing to do because you want to express yourself to show everybody, yes, I get it. And why am I not being celebrated? So it's simple things like that. The next, oh, sorry, go ahead, Evelyn.
Oh, I could not agree with you more. I actually grew up in the Baptist community, went to a Baptist private school. My mom was a school teacher there too. So very similar. I was basically in that environment 6 days a week. But when you come back to the behavior in children, my own son has always just had some issues with sitting in a classroom. He's never been able to be mainstreamed. And when he was in the first grade, I was a very young mom, and with my oldest, and I remember the teacher just kept telling me there's something wrong with him. There's something wrong with him. Brought in the school psychiatrist.
Okay.
And we went to this big meeting. The principal was there, vice principal, psychiatrist, the teacher. And the psychiatrist said to the teacher, you're just not doing enough to stimulate him. At the time we ended up, it was awesome. An affirming moment for a mother, I'll tell you. They had this whole study done on him. And it did turn out that my son does have a genius IQ. And so after the study was done, the psychiatrist basically said, he's really just too smart for you. You're not doing enough for him to keep him active, to keep him stimulated. So, and then afterwards, she talked to me about it and basically told me, you are going to have to advocate for your son for the rest of his school career, because people are going to interpret his behavior as not being, non-conformative, being bad. And she basically said, you're going to have to go in and show him this data, make sure he's getting what he needs, getting him a standing desk because he couldn't sit. So if he could stand and just kind of run with his feet, he could work. But she just basically said, with the IQ that he has, this is going to be a struggle for him until he hits college, which, he ended up graduating with an associate's degree, and he's already at 20, he already has his bachelor's and whatnot. So every year without fail, I had to go in, basically just make my presence known and let them know I am not going to let you put this label on my son. So I could not agree with you more as a mother who went through this for, from kindergarten through graduating from high school. I basically had to advocate for my son and tell the teachers that, you need to take the accountability for how he is and how he behaves in the classroom.
Well, you hit on another hidden social rule, right? Sit still, right? It's kind of mandatory. And why? I guess my question is why?
Right.
Still, right? I have to sit at my desk. I have to sit with my legs crossed and sit there, be quiet, don't move. Or you're looked at sometimes as, well, you're not complying with the rules. Okay,
Yes.
well, even if I'm not complying with the rules, right? Am I getting graded on complying with the rules, or am I getting graded and celebrated on the beauty and the gifts and the talents of academics that I bring, right?
Right.
So I think there's teachers who often want to put those two together, and they need to be separated, because a kid could be put on a very long journey of what he should or she should have not been put on, all because the teacher then doesn't have the understanding for the child. Okay, so here's the questions I was going to ask people. I don't know, do you have questions from the audience at all? So the new questions, well, let me go back just to ask the questions before. So the first question that we asked was in regards to your own management, right? What emotions, and I show the people at home so you could see it. What emotions are coming up for you right now? And the ones that we talked about were stress, anxiety, fear, shame, judgment, tiredness, and just grappling with all that's going on. Do you experience those emotions, or do you have new ones to add? And are you seeing that in children, spouse, and adults? Did you want me to pause or keep going, Evelyn?
If you want to go ahead and keep going,
Okay.
it looks like, yeah, we are, because of the delay, I think it's going to make it a little bit difficult.
Okay. The other things that I wanted to add was things that the educators should be asking, right? And this is good practice, not only for you and yourself and your mental health and well-being, but also for the families that you serve, the children that you serve, the staff that you serve. And it's just going to help in general your life too. So first thing I would say is, how do I feel in this moment, right? How are you waking up and going into your job? Are you feeling anxiety? Are you feeling stressed? Are you feeling depressed? Are you feeling happy? Are you joyful? There's a variety of emotions, and I showed you that last time, the emotional wheel. So where are you on that wheel? And I think it's important for you to know, okay, I'm going into this situation, this is how I feel. And the decisions and the perceptions in which I view things are going to shift depending on how I feel and the emotions I'm bringing to any situation. Second is, why is this making me feel down? So if you are stressed out, or if you feel shame, or if you feel guilt, or if you feel a little sad and depressed, then you need to go to the root cause of why. And I've run across a lot of adults that literally have not taken enough time to sit with themselves to understand why they feel down. They mind numb, right? You're mind numbing through watching TV, binge watching a series. You're mind numbing through social media. You're mind numbing through possibly having a couple drinks at night. You're mind numbing through not being alone and talking on the phone, or talking to your spouse, or spending other time with countless other people, but you're not getting to the root cause of why are you feeling so down. The other thing I would say is, do you have a mantra for yourself, right? What are some nice words that you could say to yourself? Because at the end of the day, we have to celebrate ourselves. And I think people forget about that. I always, when I was teaching, especially special ed, and people want to go in on, yeah, but, okay, well, I don't want to hear the but, because here's what I do know. This kid, I'll give you an example. We did an essay. This kid was in 11th grade. And literally, when I say that kid worked his butt off, and there was countless kids, but I'm just using one as an example. This kid worked their butt off so much that he stayed with me for 2 weeks after school almost every day to work on an essay. Now, this kid has special needs. So for him, school sometimes was even more of a struggle than the average, right? And if he's going to put in hours upon hours upon hours of his after school time to work on something, that's a celebration. Now, when he gets it, and if he got a D or C, now I can't celebrate that completely, but I could celebrate his resilience, his persistence, right? His ability to put the work ethic and the willpower in of, I will get this done no matter how much time it takes me. So you each have stories of wins right now. What are your wins? You survived, you're surviving COVID, right? I didn't melt down, and I'm still here. As awful as the worst day was during the beginning of COVID, I'm here. So what's your mantra? I am strong. I am worth it. I have beautiful gifts to give the world. But when you get in that feeling of down, then what are you going to? Because there's so many positive affirmations you could give yourself, but I don't know your strengths. You do. You know what you've come through to be here today. We each have a story. So you have to use those stories to keep you going during times. Do I follow the advice I give others? Now, here's the thing. I'm huge on self-care. I am. And when we went into COVID for our teachers, myself and my team, we did 2 months of professional learning just in self-care. That's all it was, specifically self-care, because we said it doesn't, and not saying that the kids don't matter, but at the end of the day, you can't serve others if you're not serving yourself. That's the reality. So there's times where I said, get off your social media, right? I was telling my team, put the phone down, just don't get on the social media, or don't turn on the news, especially when George Floyd was going on. It was difficult for us to watch. And it was difficult for me to watch. And I'm going to tell you why. The experience that a lot of people on this phone call sat and had to sit through is very different than me, a biracial woman, having to sit there and watch that, because I immediately look at it and say, that could be me. That could be my son. That could be my friend, right? It's scary to just relive it over and over and over again, because these people that we're seeing die are doing normal things on any given day. I go for a run. Arbery was gunned down in the middle of a day running. You have Breonna Taylor. She was sleeping in her bed, and nonetheless, she gave back to people through servicing them. So yes, I have to follow my advice too to keep me sane. And during this time, I know I could be doing a better job of doing it, is what I'm saying. But are you following the advice that you're giving your staff, that you're giving your spouse, that you're giving the families that you serve? You have to take a moment to just, like I would say, a pillar of yoga, take a breath. It will literally rewire your brain. There's proven studies. That's why I'm saying everybody needs to please, I want you to really think of implementing this stuff. If you take probably 5 or 6 deep inhales and exhales for 1 minute long, it will calm you down. Do it in a time of, don't do it during a time of stress, but I would say program yourself to do it now. Every day, take 1 minute, even when you first get up or when you're going to bed or whenever you want to do it, 1 minute, and you'll see the effects that it will have on you. I feel like you wanted to say something, Evelyn, so I wanted to just pause.
No, I was just going to give you a time heads up that we are approaching the hour.
Okay, thank you. The other questions that I have on here, you could see, what did you learn from your failures, your automatic thoughts that pop up as judgments in your mind. That's why we have to create boundaries. No is a full sentence, because I don't want to see a spike in anxiety for people. The importance to the current times. So we all know we can manage better, that all these things were thrown at us. Some of us are dealing with procrastinating during the normal. We are all facing frustration or irritation. We're worried, we're nervous, we're angry. There's some disappointments and unhappiness that we've had, but we have to take ownership of those emotions and not blame others. And it takes practice and growing. As we discussed last time, it can be painful, but it's worth it. So this is the wrap up. We already discussed that SEL, equity, and social justice are all tied together. And at the end of the day, we have a beautiful chance to get it right by implementing different laws, different policies, and we get to those places by the emergence of our own consciousness. And you have to be aware and sit with your emotions to get there. So we're all part of this leadership and we can make the changes. And I just question people every single time, what will your legacy be? Because at the end of the day, the kids don't care how much you know until they know how much you and everybody at that center who's serving them care. So the flash recap is, we're building a world, right, that we're providing to these children, that we are giving them foundations for their future that could have such a huge impact on them. We're giving them the skills to self-regulate and belong. We need to build those bridges for those kids. And the social emotional literacy learning piece is that bridge. And SEL and equity is a way to start with you and I first. So I just question everybody to ask themselves, what are your own convictions that you have and what resonates with you today?
Well, thank you again, Future, so much for taking the time to present this. And I'd just like to remind everybody that Future really is doing this for free, just to get this information out there, to really help educate. And Future is available for you if you would like to work with her. Reach out to her, as she is on LinkedIn, Instagram, and you can always email her at thefutureofsel@gmail.com. But definitely would encourage you to reach out, because this is something that will just help us become better leaders within our space.
Agreed.
Well, thank you, everybody. And I hope that you tune in again next week when we do this again. And I'm